Hey guys, welcome back. In today's video, we are talking about the short data being documented, the forced liquidations, how retail's beating shorts, and many more in this video. First, we're taking a look at this. So another day, another exploit of dark pool. Today, we're looking at 73% for AMC, NYSE coming in at 7.16. So when we see the fact that AMC today is down 2.76%, once again, we know the reason for why this is obviously happening. Now, of course, this isn't to say that no one is selling AMC shares. However, we've obviously seen with the data in the past before is that the majority of orders for AMC are actually buyer orders, but unfortunately, those are hidden in the dark pool, and therefore, the only orders that are having an effect on the market are these small sell orders that's coming through, and they are over trumping the buy orders because the buy orders are in the dark pool. And so this is why we've talked about how important it is to be able to differentiate between AMC price going down because of people actually thinking that it doesn't belong there versus the institutions manipulating the price and stealing the buyer orders to create an illusion that AMC price should be going down. And now these are of course very important because these are all data that we are keeping up to date. But you can also see another company, so Genius Group, reminder shorts, the short and spoofing data is getting documented every day for the upcoming lawsuit. So one of the reasons for why we always look at the dark pool, the FTDs, is because it gives us the indication of the manipulation that is happening. We should all know by now that the reason why AMC isn't showing true price discovery is because of tactics used like dark pool, like FTDs, like the swaps, that are of course suppressing the price. And now in the case for Genius Group, that's of course what they're documenting. They're trying to find every piece of data they can, whether it's with spoofing, whether it's with the naked shorts, and they're obviously going to use it and present it in the lawsuit. Now, this is very important because we talked about this, how this can be the start of something very, very big. Now, Genius Group, if in this lawsuit, with all the data that they've presented, are able to get something that is extremely beneficial for the companies and that actually attacks the short sellers, then we can know that for AMC and for GME, the data that exists out there are obviously tons. And so we can, of course, replicate and do the same thing. Again, we've seen it with these past videos, whether it's in these videos, whether it's on Twitter, you would have seen plenty of data that is showing the manipulation and exploits that are obviously going on. And so this is why we've said what Genius Group is doing here can start something very, very big. And that's why we obviously have to pay close attention to it. And it's why recently we've been seeing shorts worried about this as well, as we see them to obviously try and suppress. And on top of this, you can see why they don't want short data to be released, because what we see with this as well. So we talked about this briefly yesterday. For the stockbroker dealer in Korea Investment and Securities, which is subsidiary of BNP Paribas, they are forced liquidating GameStop shares. So in Korea, in a place where they are heavily attacking anyone who's naked shorting shares, they're now forcing people to close GME shares. And so what, to me, it shows that is just, again, highlighting what is actually happening. We've talked about plenty of times how regulations in the US should take further and severe actions on naked shorts, on just essentially short sellers who's exploiting the system. And one of the comparisons we always make is what the regulations are doing in South Korea. And we've talked about how they are obviously taking action. They're trying to ban anyone, they're trying to imprison anyone who's obviously naked shorting. And for them to now see that and force liquidate GME shares, it really does show us what is going on. And we've talked about this. These institutions have been shorting AMC and GME, not just in the US, but of course everywhere else in the world as well. It's why we see these positions in other stock markets, whether it's in Europe, whether it's in Asia, in this case South Korea, or any place else. And so with them doing this, it obviously lets us understand how much short selling is actually going on, because whilst I said this naked short selling doesn't just occur in US, is without doubt where the majority of naked short selling is occurring. And so if even in Korea they're being forced liquidated, you can just understand how many is there that exist in the US. And we've talked about, what will happen when these are obviously being forced liquidated. We talked about how they're going to be locked out during volatility. We talked about the synthetic and naked shorts exposed, the collateral crunch, the regulatory trail. Now, what we have to understand here, firstly, is talking about the synthetics and naked shorts exposed. Like I said, this is done in a country where they're heavily against naked short selling. And so we know that this is obviously going to expose multiple things. This is going to be exactly what we've said with Genius Group in terms of the data that's shown. But then the thing I want to talk about here is the collateral crunch, which is forced liquidations plus volatility. It calls margin calls. Now, the reason why I say this is because recently we've been seeing how shorts are lacking liquidity to short AMC, to short GME. And we've been seeing brokers also panicking as well. You can firstly see it from here. Rule 611 prohibits brokers from executing a trade at a price worse than the best available quote on another venue. The fact that this rule is on the table and to be axed, it tells me one thing: brokers are losing money to retail traders. So already we've seen what's been happening with these brokers recently, especially with how we're seeing more and more brokers are being forced to show proof that they have a certain amount of shares. We've seen it in MMTLP, we're seeing it with Genius Group, we've seen it with AMC and GME, and these are all signs of how brokers are obviously failing to comply with certain areas, how they don't have the liquidity and collaterals. And so it's not just for brokers, but once again, if we link it back to what we talked about here with obviously what brokers in Korea are doing, once again, you can see the correlation between the two. But what we are focusing on is, of course, the collateral. And then you can see here, firstly, the SEC hands hedge funds another gift, where we're seeing reporting requirements delayed again. So they're delaying the shorts to be reporting their positions. And we've seen this in the past. Whenever we see that short sellers or institutions in general are running out of money, are getting very, very close to being margin called, but they are also getting close to have to report these positions, you always coincidentally see these rules being released that shows to them that they shouldn't be, that delays them from showing any proof that they are going to get margin called or that they're close to getting margin called. And so this is what we talked about with, if you're wondering whether or not that these short sellers are facing liquidity problems, these are already examples, whether this is with Rule 6111, whether it's the fact that SEC is reporting a requirement delayed again. These are all showing cases of how shorts are, of course, in a illiquid situation. But then, on top of this, what you have is the reverse repo at $13.963 billion. So throughout these few months, especially throughout these few weeks, we've really been seeing reverse repo going down, and we're seeing it getting ever so close to that zero. And this is what we've said with reverse repo is obviously the easy liquidity grab for these institutions. We've gone on over it multiple times, so I don't want to bore you guys with it. But the focus on here is the fact that it is going to zero. We are seeing how shorts are running out of liquidity. And so by now, if this hasn't convinced you, if this hadn't shown you and just highlighted exactly what's going on, I don't know what else could. But then is why we've said that right now shorts are all facing problems. Whether it's the fact we've seen with the forced liquidations that we talked about here at the very start with South Korea, whether it's the fact we've talked about the collateral crunch, the Rule 611, once again, knowing that retail's beating brokers, whether it's the fact that SEC is delaying reporting requirements, or the fact that the reverse repo is going down, these are all just highlighting the illiquidity problems. And so if you're seeing any hedge funds to be borrowing more money, if you're seeing any hedge funds to be drastically changing their positions, if we're seeing any increase in FUD, which we are on AMC, on GME, and or if we're seeing the increase in dark pool usage, in FTDs, in swaps, which once again we also are, these are all just signs of how desperate these shorts are as they're trying to combat the liquidity problems, because at the end of the day, yes, they can use dark pool and that takes away the buy orders. But if they don't have the money to create new short positions, if they don't have the money to finance the existing short positions, if they don't have the money to make these swaps, to make these FTDs, then they can try and hide the buy orders, but eventually we will come through, we will triumph, and that's what they're worried about. And that's why recently we've seen them trying to increase how much pressure they're putting on us. Now, as always, this is financial advice. Do take our Instagram, so make sure to do your own due diligence research, and I'll catch you guys next time.